Hey, you're listening to After the Session. My name's Christian Cummings. Today you're going to hear a conversation with my old assistant. I would call her Erin Tonkon. She interned here at Signature back in the day. Recorded this back in New York, in Manhattan, actually in Tony Visconti's studio. Erin, through a circuitous kind of route, started here at Signature many a moon back in San Diego and made her way to New York, and then eventually ended up working with Tony Visconti, which led her to work on David Bowie's last record, Blackstar. And she was on that project from beginning to end, and her experience with it was, I'm sure, life-altering, so we talk about that quite a bit. Really cool episode. Check it out. After the Session with Erin Tonkon.
Erin, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I've been at Avatar for the last couple of days, and I'm tired, but good.
Great studio.
What are you up to these days?
I am working on kind of going out on my own a little more. I've been, working side by side with Tony Visconti for the past 4.5 years and trying to establish myself as a producer, engineer, and mixer, outside of all the great work I get to do with him. So right now I'm looking for a studio space just for mixing because I live in New York and I can't afford much bigger than
a shoebox.
Yeah.
Right. Can we tell people where we are right now?
Sure.
Can you tell them?
Sure. We are in where I've worked for the majority of the past 4.5 years, Tony Visconti's studio in Flatiron. This is also where we did all the vocals and overdubs for Blackstar, as well as The Next Day, and a lot of other cool projects, but I think that's the one that people like to hear about the most.
Yeah, of
and
course.
Christian is actually sitting right where David Bowie sat for many a years. You feel like his
that
presence.
actually trips me out a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, it's, I still so much time was spent me and Tony up here and him back there for 3 years.
The first time that you met him, what was that like?
So the first time that I met him was my first day on the job. Tony had hired me while I was still in school at Clive Davis Institute at NYU. He hired me and he said, I met with him and I was initially just going to be a summer. He was going to mentor me for the summer, and then he ended up hiring me full time after a month. But he said, "Okay, your first day at work, you're going to be editing." Dave Grohl was playing drums on one of the artists we work with, her album, Christine Young. And he was like, "Okay, you're going to be mixing these drums and, working on, I want to see how you do with that." And I was like, "Okay, awesome." And then he emails me the night before and he's like, "There's been a change of plans. We're going to be working with an artist tomorrow." And he sends me the schedule, which he's never sent me a schedule since then, but it said Mr. X. And I was like, "Who is Mr. X?" And then I get into work and, my first day on the job, and he's like, "Okay, you're going to want to sit down." I'm like, "Okay." He's like, "So David Bowie's coming in today."
Okay.
And I was like, "Okay." And he's like, "You can say hi. You might just need to, I don't know. We have to see how he feels. You might need to sit outside or something and just, get us coffee, And I was like, "Okay, whatever. I'll get to meet David Bowie."
Yeah.
And he walks in and, shakes my hand and I stayed in the room and I didn't leave for the next 3 years, and it was crazy.
Amazing.
Yeah, it was, but really quickly he had this way of making everyone super comfortable, and he became my other mentor. He became Tony and him used to say they were my godfathers,
Wow. So you guys got close.
Yeah, we got super close.
Yeah.
A lot of time working with him. So yeah, I was in this room the first time I met him. I still remember him walking through that door. And I'm young, but I grew up with posters of him on my walls.
Yeah.
That was my thing.
Yeah, he sort of transcends age a bit.
Exactly.
So we first met in San Diego.
We did.
At Signature.
We did.
And then how old were you when you ended up there? You must have been really pretty young.
I was 19 or 20.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm 27 now, so I was 7 years ago.
How did you get interested in audio?
I got interested actually when I was 16. I played music growing up, and I played in little bands, and and played guitar, and my whole life thought I wanted to be a musician. And then, I was okay. I didn't have I had a lot of like older guy friends in like the San Diego music scene that were like really good guitar players, and I was super intimidated. I played guitar and piano, and then I don't know, I started to realize that I was more interested in kind of the tones I was getting out of my guitar and pedals and amps and all that. And when I was 16, I went to, just this like normal private school in San Diego, La Jolla Country Day. And then
it's not that normal. Right? It's a nice school.
Yeah, exactly. It's a nice school, but I wasn't totally stoked there. And I found that school Fusion. There was only one school. It was in Solana Beach at the time. Now they're all over, and they had a recording studio at the school.
Oh, wow.
And I I was like going through some teenage stuff, and I left La Jolla Country Day and I went to Fusion at 16 and started learning.
Right.
Nick Angelo was my teacher there, and he started teaching me Pro Tools and basics of like compression and EQ and Fruity Loops and Cubase and all that stuff. And from 16, I was like, oh, this is what I want to do.
Yeah. You caught the bug.
I caught the bug.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then the natural spot for you to go, especially in San Diego, would be Signature, because we're talking about not a tiny market, but certainly not New York, Los Angeles, Nashville, London. I guess that makes it a tiny market.
I had a big detour to get there, though.
Okay.
I initially, I didn't know that you could study this, or I had no connections to the music industry. I didn't know anyone in it. I got an internship at KPRI.
Oh, wow.
Before I went to college.
Yeah.
I was going to Emerson College in Boston for journalism.
Okay.
And I interned at KPRI, and they let me like work a little bit in their little studio on promos. And then I went to Emerson and hated my journalism classes, but got really involved in the radio station there, WERS, and started doing like promo spots for them. I was an on-air DJ. I had a 2 to 6 a.m. shift.
Right.
And then I interned at Sony one summer when I was living in Boston. I came up to New York for the summer and interned at Sony in like strategic marketing. I didn't know how to get into a studio.
Right.
It was this like strange thing. I was like circling it and worked in like all these other aspects of the music industry, like trying to find a studio. I thought by interning at Sony, they had like a recording studio there. It was on like 55th and Madison, and they didn't. And then I was so unhappy. I knew what I wanted to do, and I was going the wrong way. And I moved back to San Diego, and that's where I finally, a few years later, got into Signature.
Yeah. And then you spent a little time there and realized, okay, I like this.
Yeah.
And now I need to move forward.
Yeah. I spent a lot of time at Signature Sound and Studio West, and it was so great. And I'm so grateful that I went back to San Diego because they were really professional studios that did like super cool stuff that I grew up listening to. But because it was in San Diego, I didn't have to just clean toilets.
Yep.
I got to like actually learn, and you guys taught me. I mean,
oh, that's good.
Signature Sound like taught me.
I'm glad to hear that
how to
was your
engineer.
experience.
Yeah, I mean, it was incredible, and I, coming to New York and seeing people that have never been in a studio before trying to get internships, and they're like cleaning toilets and making coffee. I mean, we did that too, but you guys totally you taught me, and I'm so grateful for that experience from you guys in Studio West, and
then you learned there, and then decided you got your feet wet there, and then decided, okay, I need to move forward.
Yes.
Okay, and you took the next step, which is a good move on your part, and came to New York.
I came to New York. I needed to get to New York. I didn't know how I was going to foot the bill to get to New York, so I decided I'll tell my parents I'm going back to college. I applied to the one school that I would be willing to go to quote unquote waste my time while I was trying to achieve my dream, and it turned out to be like not a waste of time at all.
That's great.
Yeah. I went to Clive Davis Institute, which is in Tisch at NYU, and I got to skip a couple. I had my like Pro Tools certifications and all that.
Yeah.
And got to skip some basic engineering courses, but learned like arrangement and surround mixing and music business and music law and music history, and now I can like arrange for any instrument, and they really. It was a phenomenal program.
You probably also, by getting into that environment, you probably expanded your network a lot.
That's how I got connected with Tony.
Yeah. Exactly.
And that was my sort of foresight into this school. My professors were like Bob Power, who, did all De La Soul and Erykah Badu, and Nick Sansano, who did like Sonic Youth, and then he also did like Belle Biv DeVoe. Like, awesome. He just had a huge, and I was like, okay, these guys know everyone. And if I'm going to get anywhere in this industry, I need connections. And it worked. Nixon Sana knew Tony Visconti.
Wow.
And when it came time, everyone was getting internships. I'd already interned for a few years. They said, you need a mentor, and asked me who I admired.
Yeah, and you picked Tony.
I did.
That's amazing. Good choice.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of his too.
It's a good guy.
And the rest is history.
Rest is history.
How long you been with Tony? 3 years? Is that what you said?
4.5, almost 5 years.
That's great.
Yeah.
So, aside from David Bowie, what other kind of projects are you working on these days?
Well, we worked a lot with this artist who's one of my favorite artists to work with, Christine Young. She toured with Morrissey for like 7 years, and she's just this like brilliant arranger keyboard, but she plays the keyboard like someone shredding guitar. And her album's been finished for a little while. It's the second album I've worked on with her. It's coming out soon. And that, she always gets awesome people. Like, I got to record Nick Zinner playing guitar, which like my 14-year-old self was like, squealing. I remember like seeing Yeah Yeah Yeahs at the 94.9 Independence Jam, and got to work with Esperanza Spalding. She's a fabulous like jazz crossover artist. She beat Justin Bieber a few years ago for Best New Artist. So she's like a lot of
She's a god.
Yeah, she beat the system. And I got to do some stuff for like Foo Fighters when they did that documentary, Sonic Highways. Yeah, the last episode where Tony was conducting and I was in the background for all,
No way.
Stuff. Yeah, I got to go to LA and
that's cool.
Yeah, it was awesome. But lately I've been, working with a lot of trying to really get my feet wet in New York. Last year I was basically traveling, recording in London and Ireland and doing some work for Eventide all year. And, there really is still an awesome music scene in New York. And I'm really interested now in cultivating like young artists and finding them and making great records.
What studios besides here? So what are you capable of recording here? This is pretty much a vocals and production kind of spot. Or not production, I said vocals and mixing. And
we mix here.
And
we do vocals, we do, guitar, bass, but we go, and that's kind of Tony's business model, which I'm exactly copying, is he's got a small space so he has low overhead and he travels and gets to record in these amazing studios. So we used to like work out of Magic Shop all the time. That was like my home away from home.
Okay.
Magic Shop closed, which is heartbreaking. We've worked at Avatar a few times, did some stuff at Electric Lady. I am now like searching more Brooklyn studios. I've done some stuff at the Bunker. I just got hooked up at Atomic Sounds, which is phenomenal. It's in Red Hook. I can't wait to work there.
I'm out here for the project I'm out here for. We initially wanted to be down in Brooklyn and we just couldn't make it work for our scheduling constraints.
Yeah.
And I'm certainly happy we ended up at Avatar.
Iconic.
I mean, that's not a big deal, but it would have been a little less expensive to be down there, I think.
Absolutely. It's still, though, I mean, it's still not cheap because just the rent.
That was sort of my business model as well in San Diego there for a minute.
Yeah.
When I opened up, we were talking before the podcast started, when I opened up my personal room, the Island is what we called it. We actually didn't, even though we probably could have, we didn't build we didn't want it to be a tracking place so much. I mean, we had a little ISO spot, but I didn't want the other large studios in the market to feel like, oh, great, Christian's opening another commercial space here in town.
Sure.
And honestly, I didn't need a large space to track drums. I mean, why would I try to mess with that when I could get that done at Signature in one of the best drum rooms in California?
Exactly.
So it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Eventide, what are you doing for them?
So we did a plug-in with Tony. I guess it came out last year called T-Verb, which it models the mic technique used for Heroes, which was, microphone right where, normal microphone distance from David. And then one microphone about 15 feet back and another microphone about 30 feet back. And, this is like the age-old story, but it was at Hansa Studios and they only had one track left to record the vocals on. And Tony was like, okay, I want to see what happens when we gate the second two microphones so they only open up when he gets loud, and then by nature of that, obviously the first microphone is totally overloading and distorting, but that created that iconic sound that is like the Hero's lead vocal. So that was awesome. I mean, we got to sit and analyze that isolated vocal and do a lot. There's a BBC special. You can look it on YouTube and hear all the isolated tracks, and
That's
you
amazing.
can see me in the background running Pro Tools. But we modeled that plugin with Eventide, so we didn't do convolution reverb because that would like take up way too much DSP, which I appreciate. I don't really use convolution reverb plugins because they take up too much.
They take a lot of DSP.
Yeah, and it's just a pain in the ass. So they did Eventide, they're incredible. And Tony Aniello, who's one of the head guys there, Tony and Tony had been fans of each other since like the 70s because my Tony Visconti was, the first person to use the harmonizer and all that stuff. So they approached him about wanting to make a plugin that modeled that. And I got to be a huge part of figuring out all the settings, and I got to make my own presets for the first time.
That's so awesome.
I know I have my own presets on 2 Eventide plugins now, and it's like, the highlight of my life. And then I got to like travel. I got to go to Music Messe in Frankfurt with the Eventide guys and like launch a product, and it was so fun. But these guys are geniuses. It's like they have to know everything that we do, and then computer programming and coding and schematics for they had to get the schematics of Hansa Studios and figure out how to model that without using convolution. Like,
yeah,
insanity.
I've dipped my toes in the in that world a little bit, and it's pretty. Those dudes are geniuses. The ones that do it right.
Yeah.
And there's an art to coding too.
Absolutely.
It's not all complete science.
No, I know. I've been tempted to learn it, but
yeah. What is your typical engineering workflow like? You do most of your work I'm guessing you do most of your stuff in Pro Tools.
Yeah, I've done one album I did with Tony where we did 2-inch 24. We actually had 24 tracks with a 16-track slave, and that turned out awesome. But mostly everything I'm doing is Pro Tools. I mean, that was also, it was terrifying. And, I am a young engineer of, age-wise, and having to punch in on 2-inch tape was like, I was like, not sleeping.
Yeah.
And Tony's like, no, you missed it by half a second. Like, oh my God,
sorry.
I'm trying.
Yeah.
And this was actually
a great experience. That's so cool you had that experience.
It was so cool. And we did like real tape flange, and like, and real very speed, like where we're actually, and it was so cool. But that was actually at British Grove, which is Mark Knopfler's studio in London. And I guess one of the guys was telling Mark Knopfler that we were punching in on 2-inch, and he was like, oh my God, like I wouldn't even do that anymore, But besides that, Pro Tools is my jam.
So
I'm using outboard gear and consoles and everything recording wise, but mixing, especially like I've got all those Universal Audio plugins, and they're phenomenal. Even with Tony, we mix in the box.
I'm all in on the UA stuff as well.
Oh God, thank God for UA.
Yeah, it's great. Let's talk a little bit about women in the world of audio. It seems to be that women are pretty underrepresented in our universe.
2%.
What?
Last I heard was like it's 2%.
Wow.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Why do you think that is?
It's interesting for me. One of my first studio gigs was at Signature, and the first person I saw there was Deb. And
she's still there.
I love Deborah Reeves. Love her.
She's amazing.
She's amazing. And I didn't realize that no women did this. I knew that not a lot of women played guitar.
By the way, Deborah plays guitar.
I know she does. I saw her in her wedding dress.
It's amazing.
Those pictures.
Yeah.
She's amazing.
Her wedding is awesome.
Oh, so cool. But, I think when we're kids, we sort of look to someone that looks like us and what they do, and that's how we find our sort of role models. I think that's talked about a lot nowadays, like especially with like people of color, like the need to have, it's shown in media, like there are like people of color doing big, exciting things, and not just have everyone on television be like white and straight. And, so even growing up in the 90s, there wasn't, I didn't see women doing technical stuff. But in my household, my dad was hopeless at anything technology based. And I was always like, me and my sister would, program the new VCR, or, the new computer or the new DVD player, and figure all that out. And I just I never felt limited by being a girl. I was very girly. I didn't like sports or anything like that. So I'm definitely like traditionally feminine, but my role models, the people I looked up to, were like Lou Reed, David Bowie, Tom Waits, Iggy Pop. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to sort of be in that world. I think the reason why there aren't more women in this industry is because it's a total boys club. Mm-hmm. And you don't see women doing this stuff. You don't see women in tech. You don't see women in the music industry other than, doing PR maybe.
Right.
And it's hard. It's not easy. No one ever assumes I'm the engineer. Mm-hmm. And still, I will walk into a studio and be questioned as to whether I know how to properly handle a expensive microphone.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's intentional. Mm-hmm. I don't think it's overt sexism. I think it's covert, and I think it's just people aren't used to seeing someone like me in a recording studio.
Right.
That isn't just getting tea, mm-hmm. or even that. But it's funny. I mean, I posted something the other day about it, and some guy said, like, well, women are known to be better listeners. Why aren't there more female engineers? And you think about it, right. And women, technically, like, the studies have been done over and over again, have better hearing. Mm-hmm. And I think it's a huge asset to have a feminine energy in the recording studio.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more with that statement. Yeah. What do you think? I mean, obviously we're not going to solve this problem on the podcast right now. What do you think what are some things that could be done? And this might be a difficult question to answer now that I think about it, but what of course, what are some things that could be done to improve the situation?
I mean, I think it's such a huge society problem of, being told in school, girls aren't good at math, girls aren't good at science. I was told that, and because of that, I wasn't good at math, and I wasn't good at science. Were you overtly
told that? Like,
yes.
Someone's like said that to you?
Girls aren't. I remember in school, and I went to like liberal private schools, but I remember being told that, almost from a scientific standpoint, that mm-hmm. boys tend to be better at math and science and linear thinking.
That's disappointing.
Yeah, I mean, it's very new that this conversation is even being had. I mean, I'm 27 years old, and I did not grow up with any concept of how unequal women are. I mean, mm-hmm. I didn't even learn about like women's rights, not to go off on this feminism tangent, but I didn't even learn about women's rights. I mean, right. It wasn't in the history books. We learned about, issues of race and religion, which I'm very grateful for, but nothing about women's rights. And I think that that's where it starts. I think that women aren't in charge, women aren't technical, women aren't capable of linear thinking in the same way. Women aren't in bands. We're the girlfriends. We're the coat hangers,
Right.
And it was just, there was nowhere to see anything differently.
If it's any consolation, I feel like in my lifetime, I have seen a significant change. I'm not saying that the problem is solved by any stretch of the imagination, just to clarify. But I see progress, which is good.
I do too. I mean, the fact that I'm able to do what I do alone, and I mean, it's like what we do. I love what we do, but we're not saving lives here. I mean, there's women that are, running countries and
yes,
surgeons and
right. But what we do, I used to not think this way as much as I do now. But what we do is actually super important.
Sure, art is.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it sort of is the point of existence on some level. And not to get too off topic, but dude, facilitating the creation of art or David Bowie's last record.
Sure.
That's really one of the most important things on the face of the planet.
It's very profound.
If not, in my opinion, the most important thing, because without art,
sure,
a lot of this doesn't make any sense.
Sure. I mean, what's the point in living? You're totally right, and you're making me rethink that, because it's a statement I'll use to calm people down in a recording studio when everyone's getting a little bit too edgy.
Yeah.
But you're absolutely right. I mean, the point in living and loving and exploring is to create beauty and art and connection. And to be able to create something that millions of people listen to is like, that's powerful.
Right.
And yeah, women should have a part in that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
They're half of consumers of music.
What can I do as a male in this business to improve? What if there's like, say, take 1 or 2 steps on my own to improve things? Just be more cognizant, be more aware.
I would say never assume, don't make assumption. And this is not speaking to you directly. This is speaking to men.
Yeah.
Hashtag yes, all men. No. Don't assume that whenever there's a girl in the room, she's there to do a traditional role, or whenever there's anyone that's not your typical engineer. And don't always look to, the obvious choice. I think that I certainly stand out in my field because I don't look like other, which who cares what engineers look, but just
but people pay attention, man.
They do pay attention, and it's I try to use it as a jumping off point. But the reality is, I don't. I've been passed over for stuff because when it comes down to it, just don't. I just don't trust a woman to do the job because it's just not. It's give women a chance.
Right.
Give women a shot, because especially with what we do, it's not something where we can, okay, give me 5 minutes and I'll show you how I can shred on guitar. Then you can hire me. Like, we need to be given a chance. And I guarantee you that women have had to work harder in this field. I think in all fields, men, there's often the assumption that a man, in my experience as a female, and I've shared this with other women across the board that agree with this experience, a man can say he does something and it's assumed that he's an expert at that.
Right.
A woman can say she does it and prove she does it and be really good at it, and it's still up for debate, and it's women, and I trust female doctors more. They had to work a lot harder in medical school. And I'm not, just this like down with the mill,
no, of course not. I
race, but
I understand that.
Give women, maybe choose the girl, to do, or I don't know. I mean, if you're teaching a class on recording or music or something, call on the girl first, or have her be the example and give her confidence. I mean, we don't have a lot of confidence.
I think maybe the answer is, in a very, very blanket answer, is just awareness.
Awareness, sure.
Because I just don't think, I think it's just something that men don't, maybe aren't even aware that they're participating in, and sort of, I mean.
I agree with you. I mean, I believe most people are good, and there's a handful of times where I thought that someone was like an asshole and they were an asshole on purpose.
Right.
The other 100 times something like that's happened, I just chalk it up to just a lack of awareness.
Right.
Of your behavior, of the way you say things, of questioning my capability. I had someone at a studio the other day ask me if I've ever worked on a console before. I'm like, I've been working.
You're like, hey,
they know I've been working for Tony Visconti for 4, and I'm not trying to pull rank, but it's like, then this kid had been working in a recording studio for a year, and I'm not, I know I haven't been around long, but what else do I have to do so that you don't ask me these stupid goddamn questions if I've ever used analog gear, or if I've ever worked on a console before, or if I, know about microphones? Like, how do you think I'm doing what I'm doing?
I think as men, we need to start with becoming more aware.
Sure.
And certainly. And
doing what you're doing, asking
more proactive.
The question.
Yeah, exactly.
What can I do? And listening.
Right.
Or show me what you got, not, do you know how to,
It's an interesting conversation. I think we just solved the problem here on the podcast.
I think so. Problem solved.
Next step, world peace.
Yes.
I want to change the subject a little bit.
Sure.
And I want to ask you some questions about success. Okay, I've been asking everybody these questions. First off, what advice would you give to others who wish to be successful in the audio world, or in anything, but just successful in general, or here in the audio business, in the record making business?
I think as like a blanket statement, there's this like Bob Dylan quote that I read when I was a kid, and it said, "A man is a success if he gets up in the morning and gets to bed at night, and in between he does what he wants to do." And I really like that, because if you really love something, like I really love engineering and production, and I don't have a plan B. And, I have to be successful at it. In terms of audio and our world, find your niche, I'd say. There's a lot of people that do a lot of things, and if you have something that you're really specifically passionate about, and a really specific type of music, or, if you're really interested in building software plugins or something like that, go for that. Because if you get really good at one thing, then that can open a lot of doors.
Right. What do you think? What do you think are some factors in your life that have led you to the point at which you are working for Tony Visconti?
I think
I know it's kind of a tough question, but I could make some guesses, but I don't really know.
I'd almost be interested to hear your guesses.
You want to hear?
Yeah, I'm almost.
I think there's a common thread actually I keep running across when I ask these questions. I would say persistence is huge. Grit.
Sure.
Those seem to be a common thread amongst all successful people in the record making business at this point that have gotten to where you're at. You tried to do something, and then you were either successful at it and you kept going, or you failed at it and you said, okay, I'm going to try this way.
Right.
And then you either succeeded and failed, and then you continued in another direction, but you never ever said, fuck it, I'm done. You were like, you just keep going. And you're like, oh, well, I failed. No big deal. Let me do it again. I think not being afraid of failure, or at least, just knowing that failure is part of becoming successful, it seems to be a common thread.
I mean, that's, kind of hitting the nail on the head of it's not easy work, and it's not glamorous work. And I worked for free for a while, and
you work hard, I bet.
I work extremely hard, and it's all I did for, I was in school full time and working full time for 3 years, and I got physically sick because I wasn't sleeping and I wasn't eating, and I, had to balance that out a little bit. But persistence, 100%. When there was a block in my path, it was finding another way to get there. I remember at Signature Sound, they were hiring someone to be a new assistant engineer there, some job there, and it was between me and it was Fredo or something.
Oh, right.
There was some job or something, and I'm remembering now, and I didn't get it, and I was like, okay, this is a sign that San Diego's not where I'm supposed to be.
Right. Instead of being like, well, shit, what's wrong with me, and I'm going to quit now, and all that stuff, you just go, okay.
And he was better than me. He deserved that job, and he had been there longer, and he had been doing it longer than I had, and at the time he was a better engineer than I was.
Right.
So it pushed me harder.
Right.
That's where I'm not a competitive person, but in school I was competitive when I saw other engineers, producers in school that were, coming. I worked that much harder on that project, and
here's an interesting observation, not to interrupt you too much.
No.
Of the people that were at Signature at that point in time, how many of those people do you think are still doing this?
I don't think many.
Maybe none?
Yeah.
Except for one person, Fredo.
Yeah, I believe it. And you know what? He's the only person.
And
he's the only person I remember.
That was there you go. And that was a while ago. And he moved to Los Angeles and has worked at a lot of different studios and engineered in a lot of different things, and has since kind of moved on into tech stuff. He loves teching, so he works for probably the leading console guy in Los Angeles. So he just runs around.
Always really,
he just runs around like maintaining consoles and going over to Chris Lord Alges and stuff and just fixing everything.
He's always soldering.
Yeah, he's a badass, something. And he's really into motorcycles too.
Yeah, he found his niche. Yeah. I mean, it sounds like the same Fredo that I knew 7 years ago.
He's amazing.
That's totally true.
It sort of illustrates the point, though, that he's persistent and has grit. Right. And you two are still going, and there was probably 9 or 10 other people around during that era that aren't. I don't know. I can't. I mean, I don't want to disparage it.
No. And it was the same thing when I, at Studio West. Like, I'm still friends with some of those people on Facebook or whatever, and you know, the fellow interns and assistants. And not a lot of them are still doing this. It's the same thing with people I went to school with, you know, it's just, it's not easy, and it's not, I don't know. It'd be, I always think like, you know, maybe I should just get a 9-to-5 job, you know, like for a split second, I'll be like, you know, it'd be so, my money would be certain, you know, I would have benefits. There'd be no lulls in my schedule or times when I'm overbooked. But that's, you know, and for a split second, I'm like, what am I talking about? I've worked way too hard, and I love what I do. I don't have a plan B. I've only ever worked in music. I couldn't get a restaurant job in New York. I've never worked in a restaurant.
Yeah, right.
You know, I figured out a way to work in music my whole life, and that's why I'm still doing it. And I don't, you know, it's a terrifying time to be doing what you and I are doing. And I mean, you've got kids. I'm totally untied, but you know, one day I want to be able to like own things, you know, but it's gonna work out. I know it will, because I love it, and I've been through the ringer. And,
so how would you what would you personally define how would you personally define success?
Respect. It's funny because some people want fame, some people want money, some people want power. I want respect.
Okay.
And that's like, I want other people to look at my work and say, people that I admire, and say, you did a good job. I respect what you do.
Right.
And it's funny. I've thought about that a lot lately, like what I want, and that's success to me.
Looping kind of back around here on you. Another question that I've been asking everybody is if they might consider sharing either a funny story that they experienced in the studio or a moment in the recording studio that's very memorable and had a ton of impact on them. So it could either be something hilarious where you know, saw something insane in the recording studio or in a recording session, or just an experience you had that was just imprinted in your memory, similar to seeing Bowie for the first time. It's probably one of them.
Sure. I mean, I've got a lot with him, just in terms of the overall themes with him of watching the way that he works and watching how he is the boss and he has the final say, but he works only with the best, and he trusts every musician, every engineer, producers he works with to do their job. And that was a huge lesson in me on letting, you know, we're all on the same team, and everyone has their job and they're good at it, and everyone has a reason to be there, and there's no need to try to nudge someone out or compete. That's like an overarching theme, but I can think of times where, you know, I remember one time with Tony, and this is like a total small scale thing we were doing, but it's super imprinted in me. We were recording a band. They were doing some footage for their label, needed some footage of them just like in their rehearsal space, and we were just tracking live, and something happened where we brought an interface over, and then there was a bug in the firmware for it, and it wouldn't download, and the amp was shorting out, and someone forgot, you know, one of the drum heads, and I mean, everything was going wrong, and Tony was pissed. He was livid, and I was the engineer. And in those situations, when you're the engineer, you know, the band's looking at you afraid, because, you know, we had a couple hours booked in this space, and we had to get it done, and we were really in a rush. And the band's looking at you, they're terrified, they don't know what's going on. And the producer's looking at you like, you better fix it right now. You know, what the hell is wrong with you? And this is early in working for Tony, and everyone's stressed out, and it was hot, and, you know, everyone was kind of anxious to be there and wanted to get out of there. And it all rested on me. You know, I'm the youngest person in the room, and I almost cried. You know, it was one of those things where like everyone's looking at me, and I almost cried. And
you were like the linchpin in the whole situation.
Exactly. And nothing was my fault. It was one of those situations where everything's going wrong, and it's just like Mercury's in retrograde or whatever the hell you want to believe in, where like nothing's working. And I I had this moment of like, I wanted to burst into tears and run out of there and quit. Like I was like, I can't do this. Like, this is a nightmare. There's no way out. And and there was a camera crew there, they're getting ready to film and there's lights on and they're like starting to take like B-roll, film. And I'm like, oh my God. And I just had this moment of like, this is where like everything else that you're good at in life comes in. And this is where like all the psychology courses I took in school and my empathy and all these other skills about being a human being. This is what makes differentiates a good engineer from a great engineer in terms of it's not all about the technical stuff. It's how you handle yourself when you're under pressure. And I said, look, this is what needs to happen next. First things first, I got to figure out this firmware situation. I actually ended up bringing another interface and we got to switch that out just like in a split second, always be prepared, always have extra stuff, switched it out and just made a plan and sat everyone down and talked through and said, this is what we're going to do next. We have, an hour and a half left. We got to do 3 songs. If we get 2, the label's going to have to deal with it. Like it was live performance and it all worked out. And at the end of the day, like everyone went home happy and we never talked about it again. But it was like the terror I had in that moment was like,
real.
It was so real. Yeah. And those situations come up all the time and it's like how you handle yourself under pressure. And that's just super, imprinted in me. I mean, that's not the last time something like that's happened for sure, but that was kind of the first most
right.
intense
And it will happen
time.
Again.
Exactly.
Totally.
And that was, maybe like 4.5 years ago.
What's the worst thing that could happen?
Right. The worst thing, and that's the other thing too. That's what I thought. And then what's the worst thing that can happen? I get fired.
Yeah.
I'll find another job, I'll find another gig.
Yeah. Exactly.
But yeah. And when no one else knows, usually when you're the engineer, no one else knows how to do anything that you're doing. And, in a situation where you don't have an assistant around, that's where you gotta, put on your brave face and
absolutely
get it done.
That's totally true. That's pretty cool.
I don't know if that's what you were asking.
No, it sort of is. Well, I want to thank you for being on the podcast.
Sure.
It was really cool for you to bring me up here and show me Tony's room here and talk about some of the stuff. We'll have to do it again.
Yeah, and I just can't believe that guy that I saw engineering on the big console and signatures wants to talk to me. Absolutely. I was so afraid of you.
Oh my God.
I mean, you were a nice guy, but he's doing what I want to do.
Right. And, well, I'm proud of you.
Thank you.
That's awesome.
Thank you so much. That means a lot.
Do you have a website or any web presence?
I do. It's www.erintonkon.com, Tonkon. And I've got, music. I just did this album with this awesome girl, Fiona Silver, that's out now. And I put a lot of stuff on there and you can find all my social media stuff from that.
Awesome. So you're available on social media as well?
Yes.
People want to get in touch with you. What's the best way to do it? Off your website?
Yeah, email me or Facebook message me.
Okay.
Instagram, DM, slide into those. I'm of my time in ways.
Right.
I check the DMs,
Well, thank you for giving us an hour or so here.
Awesome.
I know you're busy.
Thanks, Christian.
That was the end. I went back just before I coughed. It fades out.
I'll note here, faded cough.
Thanks for listening, everybody. Do me a favor and swing by my website, christiancummings.com. Download some free stuff and sign up for the ATS mailing list if you haven't already. It'll give you access to giveaways, contests, and exclusive content that isn't part of the regular show. Also, thanks to Signature Sound in San Diego for facilitating some of our recordings. And by all means, share this podcast with your friends. Gotta say that. You can also find me on Instagram at christian.m.cummings or on Twitter, Here's Cummings. That's it. Talk to you next episode. Bye.